Gas holder number 5, as it was known, at the new gas complex in Ravenshaw Street, is the last of 5 gas holding tanks to come down. Town gas was manufactured in Newcastle from 1866 until the arrival of natural gas in 1982. As demand grew, gas holding tanks were built to act as reservoirs and to keep pressure up in the lines. With the changeover to natural gas, which is piped from South Australia, the tanks were no longer needed, and all have been demolished in the last 2 years. Holder number 5 was built during the Second World War and originally towered 33 metres high in 3 sections. When it was constructed, pressure welding wasn't developed and hence the tank was riveted together, a time-consuming process which is no longer used. The tanks operated in a simple but effective way. When filled with gas, the 2 inside sections of the tower telescoped up, their weight providing pressure of 1/4 pound per square inch. The new natural gas pipeline is pressurised to 4,000 times that and controlled entirely by computer. Now the last section of gas holder number 5 is quickly disappearing under the acetylene torches. By the end of next week, all that will be left of this Newcastle landmark will be a memory. Each year, thousands of children are killed or injured while riding bikes on Australia's roads. To combat the statistics, many schools are now running programs of bicycle safety. Mayfield East Primary is such a school, and today it received a boost with the donation of 6 bikes. 5 of the unisex cycles came from the East Mayfield Neighbourhood Watch Group, and the other from the local Lions Club. Parents, as well as police from Newcastle Police Community Relations, attended a handing over ceremony today and watched a demonstration of the skills being taught in the bicycle safety program. The exercises teach control, thinking ahead, and how to judge speed and distances. All students at the school have an hour a week of bicycle safety, which includes maintenance of their machines. The 6 new bicycles mean that students who can't bring their own will still be able to take part in the lessons and learn how to play it safe on the roads.
Striking workers at Royal Newcastle Hospital have voted to meet again tomorrow to discuss the outcome of today's Conciliation Commission hearing in Sydney. But while the strike continues, the garbage is piling up and the linen is running out.
For all the news,
join us tonight
at 6.
Never mind, darling. I could have told you.
High Tide is a story of emotions woven around a plot of relationships. A young mother of the 70s deserts her child, who was then raised by her grandmother. Years later, the 3 come together again unexpectedly, and the film explores their emotional responses to each other.
Do you live here?
Yeah, are you going to?
No, just till I get my car back.
The film has been described as a performance movie, and one of the key performers is Jen Adele, who plays the role of the grandmother. Jen is a veteran of the entertaining arts, but High Tide is her first feature film role, an experience which she says was unforgettable.
Fabulous. I mean, I sat one night in my house and I thought, here am I being paid to do this, and I've got all these marvellous people I'm working with. I mean, they're so specialised. I mean, Gillian Armstrong's a wonderful director. Russell Boyd is a fabulous cinematographer. Judy Davis, I mean, she's an international actress and one of great merit. I enjoyed working with her very much.
Jen says that despite the predominance of women in the acting and production roles, everyone should be able to relate to the film. High Tide has received good reviews so far, and for her part, Jan has been nominated for the Australian Film Institute Award for the Best Supporting Actress.
I was thrilled to bits when they announced me. I couldn't believe it. What? I was that excited, I was like a lunatic.
called a Nippy scooter, it's modified from a Honda 80cc motorcycle.
The disabled person gains entry up a rear ramp, their wheelchair locks in, and they can then go almost anywhere they want. What was once a real chore like going to the shops or visiting now becomes easier. The Nippy costs a little under $5,000 and has just come onto the market.
Big advantage of the bicar, it's extremely convenient to get into and out of by a disabled person. They are completely independent in the sense they don't need anyone to help them. It's very economical to run, to service, to purchase in the first place, and in addition it's extremely safe for the rider with three-wheel stability and a very, very strong, secure safety frame around the rider, protecting him in the passenger compartment.
This weekend, organisers of the Noel Burt Appeal will conduct a collection at the Charlestown Square Shopping Centre, along with a display of the Nippy scooter. To date, $15,000 has been collected. Organisers say they'll need to raise $250,000 to buy and modify a house, as well as to cover ongoing medical costs.
Do you think it's a safe? The Red Shield Appeal, held in June this year, is the Salvation Army's main source of income. Several thousand volunteers from schools, church groups, service clubs and private individuals gave up their time to help with the door knock. The funds raised enable the Salvos to keep operating their many community projects, including crisis counselling, drug and alcohol rehabilitation centres and emergency accommodation. Today the final amounts raised were announced at a thank you to the Hunter Lunch. Representatives from many of the community groups who helped in the appeal attended and were presented with certificates of appreciation by Assistant Appeal Chairman Ian Butler. Captain Alan Peterson acknowledged that the appeal had to cope with several difficulties this year, including a shortage of volunteers in some areas. He said the Army is very grateful that it has been able to meet its targets.
We weren't expecting more, we were hoping to achieve what we got. It was, there was a few negative factors perhaps that made us worry at one time, but when we counted it all up last week, it was all there.
The PSA decision to stay out has meant that the terminal can't resume loading operations. The strike is having sweeping repercussions, with the Australian Wheat Board claiming that it may have to renegotiate wheat contracts at lower prices unless the men return to work. The Farmers Federation says its wheat farming members are angry about the delays, and the Federation has promised to financially back the farmers if necessary. The Federation is determined to see the new work practices introduced, and while it says it's unlikely that court action will be taken against the strikers, it hasn't been ruled out. The Public Service Association is claiming that the continuous running of the terminal will increase the amount of grain dust, thus increasing the chances of a fire or explosion. It says there may also be health problems caused by employees inhaling the dust. The Grain Handling Authority says after the explosion and fire at the terminal in April, all the recommendations made in the Department of Industrial Relations report have been implemented. Dr. Tony Green, who compiled the report for the department, says as long as the extraction units are kept in working order, their bins are cleaned out daily and the area is swept clean, continuous operations at the terminal will not increase the possibility of spontaneous ignition. He says it also won't increase the health risk. The hearing continues in Sydney tomorrow.
The Newcastle Jockey Club hasn't had the best year because of rain. In May, the Carlton Newmarket was rained out and could not be rescheduled. That cost them $80,000, and the clash on Tuesday will push that lost revenue to six figures.
Well, had we raced on our own on Tuesday, which we have normally done in the past for our sponsors AHA, we would have made approximately $20,000. We made $18,000 last year and $21,000 the year before, because we raced with Sydney connections, strong support from the trainers, jockeys and horses. Now with Canterbury racing against us, all those prominent trainers and jockeys will remain in Sydney to race at Canterbury on that day.
In November last year, the Australian Jockey Club wrote to the Newcastle Club stating that if a meeting was washed out, it would not be rescheduled on another club's date. But the AJC has not kept its word, and Newcastle is not impressed.
I don't know whether gutless is the strong enough term to say, but we're certainly disgusted at Newcastle Jockey Club with what's happened to us. They've been of no assistance whatsoever. They've just turned their back on us, and we're out in the cold like a third-rate club.
The Newcastle Jockey Club is now expected to take the matter to Sports Minister Michael Cleary to make sure it doesn't happen again.
This is Marjorie. Built in 1938, she is by far the biggest attraction at the museum, situated southwest of Kurri. Today the old engine was earning her keep, transporting young and old through the bush in a manner straight out of the history books. All the original track was torn up when the mine was closed and the trains were no longer needed. 5 kilometres has now been relayed by volunteers and more is on the way. Those working on the line say they'd like to see it run all the way into Hexham as before. Restoration of the old mine site is progressing as well, with grants from the Commonwealth Employment Program and the Steel Regions Assistance Scheme. The old pay office has been restored to its original condition, and there are plans to turn it into a museum to house smaller artefacts. One of the giant cooling towers, built in 1902, has also been remodelled to its former glory. It used to cool water needed to operate the power generator which ran the mine. The next Railway Museum Open Day will be October the 4th.
First try to South was only 6 minutes into the game when winger Robert McCluskey scored an easy try. It wasn't only the 26 players who were running. When the rain came tumbling down, hundreds of spectators were forced to dash for cover. Cessnock couldn't do a thing right. Every time they went close to scoring, their pattern of play broke down. Paul Hazel scored South's second try through more poor defence from the Goannas. Wade converted and South went to the half-time break, leading 10-0. Robert McCluskey scored his second try 10 minutes into the second half after being perfectly put through the gap. That was the beginning of the rot for Cessnock, with South piling on 4 tries in only 16 minutes to win the preliminary final 30-0. Next Sunday at the No. 1 Sports Ground, South will play defending premiers Lakes in a replay of last year's grand final. In the reserves, Maitland play West, and in the thirds, South meet West.
It's a sight familiar to the Minmi landscape since the turn of the century, a steam train hauling coal from No. 2 Stockrington Colliery. But operations at the coal and Allied-owned mine are being scaled down and the steam trains are on their way out. Coal and Allied says for economic reasons the coal will be hauled by trucks, but residents say it's not on.
They've reached a stage of they're not prepared to tolerate the conditions that's being imposed on them at this stage, particularly the proposal at this stage to increase the haulage of coal by road.
I feel that it's too dangerous to put them over this road. The road is dilapidated. During the last 12 months since they've been hauling coal out of Stockington, they have thrashed the road to pieces. I consider it as a safety hazard to the people that's got to travel to the road. It is totally inadequate for the haulage of coal.
Lanigan's Drive is already cracked and potholed. Residents claim that running more coal trucks on roads ill-equipped to carry them poses a serious safety risk.
Not only for myself, but for my neighbours and my family, who travel in and out all the time.
Also at stake are the jobs of the locomotive drivers. Kerry Bryan says 18 men will receive their retrenchment notices on Friday.
Well, there's 2 or 3 blokes on the job that have never done anything else, only just worked on this railway. So, you know, they feel very strongly about it. Plus, they love the locos themselves. They're really in love with them, you know.
But it's not just the poor state of this road or the loss of jobs that are at issue. Conservationists say the line is historically significant, a legacy of an age that's long past.
It's the last commercially steam-operated railway in Australia. The second issue, it's possibly, which has to be confirmed, the oldest operating railway in Australia, first put through Parliament in 1854. Industrially, it's just the last of its type in Australia. I would say it's probably the most important industrial site in New South Wales, if not Australia.
This morning, the Costain-owned Walkworth mining company decided to abide by Prime Minister Hawke's request to withdraw its overtime directive. Despite accusations from the unions, the company says it didn't break the moratorium. It says it simply wanted the men to work 8.5 instead of a 7-hour shift in order to increase production by 20% and save jobs. The chief executive of the company, Bob Humphries, says the action was taken out of frustration because he says nothing was being achieved in the Prime Minister's month-long moratorium. On hearing of the backdown, the Miners' Federation called off tomorrow's national coal strike and instructed its members at Walkworth to return to work. The miners have claimed victory against Walkworth, but it'll be short-lived. According to some sources, about 2,000 jobs will go from Hunter Valley Mines at the end of the moratorium on Friday, a sacrifice that Coal and Allied's Bruce Thompson says the Miners' Federation is willing to make in order to achieve its ultimate goal of a national coal authority. Coal and Allied today outlined its settlement package, which it believes could avert post-moratorium disruptions to the industry.
Statements made by the unions have pointed out with great clarity that there will be mayhem after the moratorium, and we believe that as the biggest producer in the Hunter Valley that we wanted at least to show our hand and say, well look, if the other parties involved in this problem can be prepared to bend and to give something, we're then prepared to do what we can do to stabilise the future employment of our workers.
The company says that it will freeze retrenchments for 2 years and won't close any of its underground mines, providing the economic conditions don't change. If there is a downturn, it will go to the Joint Coal Board for arbitration. This will only be done if the unions and the state government cooperate. The unions must implement their 7-point plan, adopt Queensland open-cut mining practices and manning levels, as well as promising to accept arbitration decisions without striking. For the government, it will mean a severe kick in the pocket, with the reduction of rail and MSB charges, the abolition of open-cut super royalties, and the reduction of underground statutory royalties. The unions are still considering their responses to the plan, but late this afternoon the state government announced a 20% cut in coal royalties and has called on the federal government to match its annual contribution of $25 million. Mr Greiner, who is in Newcastle on a mock-run election campaign, was also critical of the northern miners, saying they aren't being realistic if they think they can hold on to their outdated work practices. He says the coal companies must also share some of the responsibility for the crisis, but he says the state government has been negligent.
I mean, the ultimate insult was handing out a reduction in royalties for the next year, 2 days before they knew 100% that there were going to be significant redundancies. And it's akin to saying to a patient who was terminally ill, we've got this great medicine that would have been helpful to you 3 years ago. I mean, it is not only unfair, it's almost cruel to people to make that sort of announcement when it's obviously too late to have any impact.
The order for the 6 captains' chairs was placed with the Hunter Valley Woodturners Society. Made from Tasmanian oak, the chairs are being assembled in the backyard workshop of Joe Friedman. Joe was a well-known Newcastle photographer. Retiring 5 years ago, he took up woodturning as a hobby. The chairs are cut from solid pieces of timber on a bandsaw built by Joe himself. The legs and struts are turned by other members of the society. Each of the components are then carefully screwed and glued into place to make a fine piece of furniture. Nobody can tell you how much each chair costs to make. The timber was donated by Rod Scott Timber Merchants, and for these craftsmen, it's a labour of love.
Is there a lot of work? How many hours is there, say, in putting together one of these?
Oh, well, we're doing it for love. We don't take our time in, because if we do, we say, gee, that cost a lot of money.
Today's meeting is one of the major events on the BMX calendar in the Hunter and Central Coast region. 280 competitors from as far away as Gunnedah and Uralla took part. Competition divisions range from over 40s to these less aggressive under 5s. All eyes were on 26-year-old Phil Hanscorf of the Central Coast, who 3 weeks ago won the World Cruiser Class title in Florida. He easily took out the over 26 years cruiser event today, easing up at the finish. The $300 Pro-Am event was won by Manly's Glenn Feist ahead of Murray Kelson of the host club Maitland Tanambut. The Miss Pedals trophy went to 11-year-old Marie Hadaway of Budgewoi and the Mr Pedals to Craig Casser of Blacktown. The Wind Safari is one of the most demanding rallies in the world, and this year a third of the starters failed to finish. It covers 6,000 kilometres across the outback from Sydney to Darwin. Doug Stewart and David Officer finished 1-2 in their Mitsubishis, and 40-year-old Harold Gill third in his work-sponsored Nissan. He was placed 9th in last year's event, and his third yesterday augurs well for his future in the event. Gill says he was pleased with third place, and with a few modifications can win the race next year. His main claim to fame in motorsport is off-road racing, in which he is the reigning Class 1 national champion. His latest success in the Winds makes him one of the most versatile drivers in Australia.